Hello.
Welcome. And we
Thank
have
you.
the expert in decoding the Brotherhood shenanigans.
Right? And I'm glad
Welcome.
we won't be doing a up their
Yes.
nose view, but we shall certainly be all up in their business.
Yes. Most definitely. Well, I look forward to this because, wow, there is so much going on right now. I
It's
mean, if we're
crazy.
just looking at the Epstein files dumps, right? And we're
Hmm.
looking, I mean, I'm just sick of it. I mean, it's just like one thing after the other. It's nauseating. And I actually literally mean sick of it, like nauseated,
Yeah.
because there are some very disturbing things we've seen. But at the same time, are we surprised? Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, when we've been investigating this level of evil for the longest time, and now it's just slowly but surely starting to show its face. And I always say, Epstein, he's a face, he's a part of it. His
Yeah.
face is just the face of this entire monster that is unraveling itself now. Because if we think only Epstein, I mean, we're seeing a lot of videos with just Epstein doing shenanigans, right?
Right.
But if we think Epstein was the only one, we've got a lot. One of the most disturbing ones I saw, man, and I must say I don't see that many because yeah, I mean, I know what's going on. I just don't like to see that stuff. But this big guy in a swimming pool with one of these disgusting, like BDSM type masks on, drowning this girl, like laughing and shrieking hysterically, this grown, big, fat guy, and just like dunking this girl in the pool. And I mean,
Mm.
she's like screaming, and he's, oh, just the act of such
Brutality. Yeah. Wickedness.
sadism,
Yeah, that's a good
so
word too.
sadistic. Yeah, sadistic is just on another level. And of course, the famous pic where you see this young girl lying on her back and Prince Andrew bending over her, and you look, she's so young.
Hmm.
She's what, 12, 13, and one can only imagine that they'd probably given her too much drugs or something, and she must have
Yeah.
passed out. And just like, ah, disturbing when we're seeing this stuff. Anyway, so I think there's a lot of that the Brotherhood's going to be revealed. We've got some names in the Epstein files, even our ex-prez is in there, Zuma. I don't know what he was doing there, though. Apparently went for a meeting, and a couple of others as well. We'll
Yeah, they
see.
used to
We'll see what.
regularly meet at our place for a book club. But
Did
just
you know
crazy.
Epstein? Did you ever come across him, Epstein, in
I did.
your time in the?
Yeah, I did.
What was your experience with him?
Just in general, because he wasn't part of my circle groups, he was lower, but just in general. And then
Right.
the island we used for training, which we brought out in the Epstein videos. But there was more, which I think, when we get into it, what are the things that what are the can of worms that nobody's opening? Um, it feels like a really slow drip, but we have to be aware that it's far beyond just the sexual exploitation. That what was that place used for? It was used for training children. It was used for, training the hierarchy children. You have the games, which you're going to have elite buying, selling, bidding. You get some that buy to play. You get others that are going to buy to sponsor, kind of like your Hunger Games, where they can sponsor for good or for bad or, however. But that was, but on top of all of that, really there's a word that describes that area. You get underground submarine Nazi lines and hubs, the pineapple under the sea, but you also have a development of certain forms of nuclear weaponry or things that will be used as nuclear weaponry. So none of those things are really coming out, that, you know, that island was quite radioactive and hot, hot, hot.
Do you think that will still be released? Because I think, the way, and I try to view this thing through someone's eyes who's really just starting to wake up. Okay.
Mhm.
And then, because despite, as I always say, we've been talking about these. I mean, you have the lived experience, right? But just as far as this channel is concerned, we've been talking about this now for nearly 6 years. So we kind of also got into it really deep on the first show with you. Really, we were talking about
Mhm.
deep things and really underbelly things from day dot. So knowing it from that angle, it makes absolute sense when you talk about the radioactive, call it equipment, that they have there, or shenanigans. I mean, I can just imagine, wow, that's going on there. So you would definitely need to prepare humans. I can see that. I can actually see why that's necessary. Like everyone was now talking about the girls and the young girls. A lot of people I don't, and yes, and you're getting to understand with, more and more stuff is being released about the kids as well. So people are now, can you imagine dropping that bomb that you've just said about the radioactive activity going on there? Can you imagine human beings having to process all of that at once? It will
Yeah,
seem like
it's a
just the
lot.
world's one. Yeah.
It's a lot to process, you know. We've talked too, just to kind of take it to another level, um, and staying with a simpler version for people. But we've talked about degrees in the system. And just to give an idea, we know that a lot of our presidents, a lot of the world leaders, they're face fronts for real people behind the scenes who are really running things. And degree wise, you have, your basic master masons up to that point is going to be your first to fourth degree. Fourth degree, they become a master mason. That's equivalent to 15 degrees of illumination. And what it connects to is what rituals will they be privy to. Your 15 degrees, they're just going to start to get into understanding, hey, my brothers, my circle group, they engage in not only sex magic, but they engage in rituals. So they'll just start to get into that. Then, your 30 degrees, that's going to be, further. They're going to be involved in more things. The majority of our past presidents were 33rd degree Masons. So, that's really nothing on the totem pole. Was Epstein maybe a little higher? Probably. The majority of your kings, we talked about, how we felt Bad Bunny was stepping into that position. You also get your grand high priest and priestesses. The majority of them are going to be usually around a 60-degree illumination. So they're going to be beyond, that 33rd degree by quite a ways, but there's still, when you understand that there's still 90, there's still 180, there's still 360, you understand that even though your grand high priests or priestesses are very skilled, there's still a limit. The longer they're working towards still continuing in their understanding, they're going to grow to that place of, the 180 degrees. But you don't get many that, are really fully into it, for a long time. But that kind of gives you a picture. So, from my understanding, a lot of your kings are going to be somewhere between that, 50, 60 space. we also see a lot of badges, you know, a word that would describe Epstein. He really was a captain. A captain of what? You know, of submarines. Well, guess what? He also was a captain of flying planes too, I guess. So, um, you know, you're going to get him transporting. It was his thing and setting up things for transportation. So I know Mornay's got
Excellent.
some clips. I'm curious if we could play the one with Clinton testifying about his connection to Epstein and Ghislaine.
She stated that President
Clinton is
Clinton
such a
was her
liar.
friend, not Epstein's friend. Is that accurate?
I'd say that it was accurate to say that I felt closer to her than to him.
And for the record, why was that?
Because I had seen her more, and because she was very good friends with Evelyn Rothschild and his wife Lynn, whom I knew and was in regular touch with.
L. Rothschild. You know, so who are those people? I encourage people to go to my kingdomlivingwithjessie.com, my Unveiling the System series. I have about 4 videos in there about the Council of the System. I also have one about Ted Turner and Dick Cheney and circle groups. You know, both Evie and L, that's what I call them, Rothschild, they both were connected to the United Nations. And in that, you have a mass amount of them being used to funnel money. You know, what would happen? The Clintons would be helping to set up projects, guised humanitarian efforts, and you would have UN financial backing it and getting into areas. But think about that. Where does the UN get its money? You know, where does it get its money from? It's taken from we the people, no matter which nation you're in. That's really where they're getting the money from, is by, you know, pillaging the people. And then they come in with their fake humanitarian efforts, their historical, setting things up as historical sites. What they're really doing is removing our access to the land, the waterways, and, you know, our access to certain areas where they're setting up underground, and they want to limit our access. That's exactly what was happening. And we also know Ghislaine Maxwell was heavily involved with the Terra Mar project. This is a lot if Bill's saying, oh, you know, no, I knew her the best. Well, what was she a big pusher of? What was Hillary's specialty before she became Secretary of State? Who knows that? What was her specialty before she became Secretary of State?
I actually don't know that.
She was a lawyer. She was a lawyer.
That's right.
And one of her specialties was real estate. So think of that,
Wow.
of her connection with Ghislaine, her and Bill's connection with Ghislaine Maxwell. You know, even Bill was involved in law. And both of that, their connection with that and the United Nations, securing places, real estate, land, taking away our rights from it. But in that, they got into the Terra Mar projects, where then they were, I don't believe it was just about selling water. They weren't just selling water rights. They were selling, you know, underground military bases that were things that were under the water, you know, massive Nazi hubs. That's what I believe that they really were having people buy, sell, and trade into. And that gets into, you know, where do you want to pay to play? You know, these elite have to buy into certain areas if they want to play in those areas. And by playing, you know, it involves the temple prostitution and the sacrifices. With that, it's going to be much more, because, you know, their overall agenda, which that gets into their real reason behind Epstein Island, deals with diamonds. You know, we've brought out how they sacrifice and kill children and people What do they do afterwards? These elite can pay more money to turn their ashes or their bodies into diamonds. Then they pay even more money to curse those ashes and sell those to the food and the pharmakia. But our question has to be, what is behind the diamonds? Is it just, that they want to look nice, that they want to adorn themselves? No, it's not. In fact, that's not the biggest use for the diamonds. And I would propose, and I brought this out on Telegram on a show I did last night, that their biggest thing revolving around the diamonds is nuclear. They're creating, limitless nuclear things with those diamonds. And when we understand that, then we understand a whole bunch more, because what they're creating are things that they can also use as weapons against us people, whether that's, having satellites that then can monitor, track, trace, or that can have energy flow through them. All of it revolves around their end time agenda to, break open the veils, get the spiritual gates lined up all at one time and opened so they can usurp the throne of God. And this is how they think they're going to do it, is through their creation of mass amounts of energy. They're not afraid of nuclear energy. But what have they done with a lot of their nuclear energy plants? Think of how much money they spend to invest in an area and put a nuclear plant there. But have you ever noticed how the majority of nuclear plants are not up and operating, how quickly they become abandoned? The same with a lot of military bases. They'd put them up and then they abandon them. Look at other government or public buildings, all these government buildings, all these schools, they'll put them up and then they abandon them. Why? Even churches, they put them up and they abandon them. Why?
I often wondered that. It's the same here.
Yeah.
It's the same here. You'll see that
worldwide.
And especially the more rural type areas I find here, so more like out of the big cities. Maybe it's just more noticeable there. But definitely, why is that? Interesting.
Yeah. I have Colleen put something up interesting and relevant in the chat too. She put Epstein spent $300 million on closing all tunnels on that island, left a pipe sticking out of the side of it with a pile of kids' bones on the ocean floor under it. I can't verify the stuff with the kids or the closing of the pipes. From my understanding, you had a lot of layers, and that it's a big pineapple, 8 to 9 or 8 to 10 stories. That's a big pineapple under the sea there that they're using as a submarine base or hub.
I wanted, let's talk about the kids' bones story. I have a question mark around that. Surely they would be a lot smarter in terms of getting rid of evidence than putting the bones in the sea. I mean, at some point.
Yeah, I think
they
they
were
had. No, I think they were much smarter, because my experience was that, they had massive incinerators on that island. They were creating diamonds. And we brought out, what happened to the Epstein diamonds. They also were a main diamond supplier for the Vatican. What happened to the Epstein and the Vatican diamonds? I brought out that, that there are individuals, Navy SEALs, who claim to have kind of, thwarted that gig of Epstein's. But ironically as well, that those same people, they have a general that sits on their board of directors, who former military general, who has made a massive deal with Aiken Diamonds. on top of that, they claim, you know, Aiken claims they do lab grown diamonds. Well, you know, we know what really that is. It's your Epstein, your Vatican diamonds. And in top of that, then they made another deal with military to develop military weaponry. That military weaponry then, you know, that deal then went back to those same individuals who claimed to thwart the gig of Epstein, and they're creating diamond military weaponry. You know, that's really what's happening with all that. It's not a cover. You know, diamonds are not easy to destroy. So they're literally using and profiting off of the evidence.
That, you see, that makes a lot more sense, because surely if by now, let's say they were just throwing bones into the sea, we know that when, you know, we've heard a lot of testimony from survivors who've survived the hunts, the most dangerous game, etc., that the remains actually get fed often to the pig farms here in South Africa, the cheetah farms, all sorts of places like that. So that evidence is destroyed, basically. And also, you know, when we're looking at exactly what you're saying, the way it's actually been put in our food, the diamonds that have been made, that it's actually been put in the cement that's building the buildings. Because surely after all this time, somebody would have discovered a skeleton that has floated with the currents. Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, that doesn't make sense that they would be doing that. I'm not saying there's a single body, not a single body under the sea, but I don't think that would be done on a mass scale. I think the way, as you say, the way that
a diversion, they put one or two there, you know, as kind of a diversion, but
right, exactly, and that's why I say these things to me, and I'm not saying they didn't, but this to me is a point we have to think about, and this is why I discuss things like this, because this is kind of where we need to use discernment. You know, it's like, it doesn't make sense they would just leave bodies there.
Yeah.
They would
well, someone's putting up in the chat that the claim was that there was 144, I think, bodies there in the water, which that's interesting, because when you get into the end time things, you get the 144,000 that are believed to be the true heirs and those that will be saved. So is it a direct statement to that, a reminder that there's only so many that are saved? And when you think about, you know, their main form of transportation was under the water, could they have done something like that so that as they're bringing in kids or people, that reminder is constantly there that, you know, they could be killed too? Is that a way to enforce silence? It's very plausible. Yeah,
I definitely think the people that were involved, I think anyone involved with Epstein on that level would have known the price of speaking. It's just so gross, the stuff that's coming out. But anyway, I mean, I think it's good that we're talking about these things. I do, because, and also just, again, you know, there's so much sensationalism around it. And again, we must be careful of that. Yeah, I mean, just scroll through YouTube. Every second podcaster has got their, and it's good. That's how we get to know these things. But sure, the noise as well. The noise in these situations is huge. But anyway, one thing I actually wanted to ask you, we're looking at obviously a lot of inversions at the moment, and this whole transgender movement and the way they've been targeting the kids for the last decade or so, particularly, right? Even before that, but really badly and openly, a lot more openly. I mean, but if we look back in history over time, we look at so many of those presidents' wives, not just the Americans, the royal families, the European royal families. Those are men. There's no way.
Not all.
At least
Not
80,
all.
that's at least 80%. I agreed. 80% of those. Okay, I don't know. Let's make it
The
50
queen
50
and
to
her
be fair.
twin were real women. Hillary Clinton is a
Yes,
real
no.
woman. But
Okay. No, that makes sense to me. But I think, there are, I don't even know who they are. Look at the pictures. That's a man in a dress. That's a man in drag. So if we're looking at this whole inversion thing that's been happening since the longest time, we understand that it has a lot to do with the whole Baphomet as their one of worship, that has pretty much everything to do with it. And basically trying to create a race that is not of God, but literally bred from test tubes. So to give to give one body, both male and female, both sex organs. So you can be breeding like through not natural anymore. I do believe that's what they gunning towards, is that there are going to be no more natural births. It's going to be done like this through these created humans.
yes.
So if we go back to the beginning, what is your opinion on when this whole inversion thing actually began? And also, there's a lot of talk about sacrificing the first child. I'm hearing a lot that the ones in the system either have to sacrifice the first child or have it inverted, either in the womb or afterwards. That's part of the sacrifice, is to have your child inverted. What is your take on that? Talk to us about that, because again, there's a lot of noise around that.
Yeah, I think, from my understanding, that is true. That, and I'll say not every family, you get generationally where some have sacrificed and that has been held up, so that no more in their line have to be sacrificed. But you'll get an offering up, like, in my lines, the women are offered up to Lucifer. You're set aside, you're chosen to serve Lucifer, and there's not an option in that. They will kill you if you don't. That's just the short of it. And or at least try, as desperately as they can. But that's how some families are, is that there's that offering to a spirit of some sort. You get others that will make alliances with certain principalities, ancient gods. You get your whole line of the Pope, the Vatican, the Jesuits, all, they're not going to outwardly state that they're worshiping other deities, but you've got them offering themselves to Lucifer, but also to the gods Dagon. They wear the fish god clothing all the time. Their mitre hats are, the head of a fish. So you get the ancient Philistine gods, the Hittite gods, all of those things. So there is an offering up, and aversion has become a very easy way for people because they feel like it, in the long run, it's the lesser of evils. If they, want their offspring to live. But really, there isn't any life that comes out of that. There's an utter destruction, and they're not preserving their family lines. The names are lost because of what they're doing. But they're told that there'll be other ways, that they'll either have other children that things will be carried on through, or, they'll be adopting children to carry on that family line or name, but it's really not their blood or their genes that is doing it. And maybe that's part of why so many do it. Maybe because they want it to end for their line, and it's a slow kill method.
It has to end some way, doesn't it? It can't carry on forever. Yeah. So, wow. I like the way you think.
Yeah.
because that
let's,
makes sense. You know,
yeah.
God works in mysterious ways.
So I think we've got
Sorry,
another
carry on. You were
video.
going to say something.
Yeah, I was saying we've got another video. Let's
Right.
get into that and see. Let's look a little bit at Hillary's testimony here, and we'll get into her in a minute here.
Joint campaign. Okay, sure.
Fun.
Okay, so we have talked about those connections. In past public statements, as in 2017 speeches and interviews, you described Pizzagate as a baseless conspiracy theory, alleging you and others ran a child sex trafficking ring from a Washington pizzeria basement. Have you reviewed any 2025-2026 Epstein files that were released that you believe reference or relate to those specific 2016 claims regarding the Podesta emails, Comet Ping Pong Pizza used as code possibly?
I'm sorry, does
You're
this
asking
relate?
her about whether she's reviewed emails in the Epstein files, which relate to the wacky Pizzagate
You
scandal.
could characterize it however you want. I just would like to know if she's familiar with any of them.
So
She's
excuse me,
commenting.
your question is about whether or not she has reviewed any emails in the Epstein release files about Pizzagate.
Correct.
Pizzagate was totally made up. It was an outrageous allegation that ended up hurting a number of people, that caused a deranged young man to show up with his assault rifle and shoot up a local pizzeria. I can't believe you're even referencing it. You should be.
There are connections to the language.
Well,
I'm
the
not talking
QAnon
about-
people believe there are, so
I don't know what
have
QAnon
at
people
it.
believe.
Have at it.
But you've accused certain parties, and I think even right now today, of promoting slow walking or information in ways that fuels conspiracies. In your view, did any Epstein-Maxwell related investigations or file handling pre or post 2019 contribute to or intersect with the spread of Pizzagate style theories about Democrat figures?
Objection.
I have
Call
no
for
way of answering. That is the
possible
most
speculation.
ridiculously.
Have you or your representatives identified any Epstein file content that has been misinterpreted online to revive those claims? And what steps, if any, have you taken to clarify?
Again, object on the ground of.
I think that this is all very
Speculation.
reasonable.
Well, first of all, I don't follow the crazy conspiracy stories that are online. I regret that anybody does. I find it quite sad, but also disturbing that people would believe some of what is put forth, like Pizzagate. So I have taken no steps to review anything
Do you think
that might
pizza-
have any connection to something which I think is totally bogus.
John Podesta, your 2016 campaign chair, appears in some Epstein file contexts, social overlaps or mentions. Were you aware of any of the Podesta-related communications in the released files?
Can you
that
please provide examples or the evidence that you would like us to review or the exhibits that reflect that in
I
order
can
for her to be able to
I
do
can
that?
get some
mean,
exhibits
somebody
and pause
starts
this
with
question
Speak to
in the
that when you
meantime.
provide those.
I will get those, and I will skip that question until we can.
Generally, if she's aware.
Generally, she is asking if she's aware of specific information that is in the files that you all are relying on. Please provide the witness with
If your
copies of that
client
materials.
doesn't know or has no recollection, she's welcome to state so.
We're also welcome to actually see the information that you're speaking
And
to.
again, the representative is asking general.
I mean,
general
really,
questions.
I mean, I expected a lot of interesting questions today, but Pizzagate was not on my list.
That's okay. We're asking all sorts of things here.
You certainly are. You certainly are.
We're just trying to get the truth out to the American people
Well, that
and
would
give some
be
clarity.
very helpful.
Are you aware of any files that were on Anthony Weiner's laptop in a folder that was titled insurance, life insurance, with a zip file titled frazzled.
This is way
No,
outside the
chairman's
scope.
ruling.
This is way
within the
outside the
scope?
scope.
Is this within the scope, Mr.
If
Chairman?
the chairman rules that it's not within the scope, I
Mr.
have other
Chairman, based on what
questions.
you said in the public hearing, is this within the scope?
We can go off the record for a moment to confirm.
Mr. Chairman, is this within the scope?
We'll go off the record and consult.
Interesting, interesting. Well, the
Firstly,
first
is
thing you
that
have
her?
to-
Is
that's
that
what I was.
degree?
That's the first thing I was going to address. My expertise, experiential opinion is absolutely not. It's not her. It's a good faker, but it's not her. You know, she had such a disdain. That's the first thing. You know, they would not be pulling her in. They would not be treating her that way if it was the real Hillary, because people feared her. They feared the things that they witnessed her do. And, you know, there's no way that they would be doing the stuff that they're doing. I think that, you know, this faker is doing her best, but I think she's realizing, and you get a moment where you actually see fear on her face. And I hope that moment is her realizing that she can be held accountable for the things Hillary did. Can she be accountable for the things Hillary did if she's faking and being Hillary? I think she can. So I think that fear is hitting her that, you know, what did she get herself into? And that's what you see. The real Hillary had no fear. She would have ate him for lunch if, you know, they were doing that stuff to her. You know, nobody's going to go against her. They feared her too much. But in that, you know, it's interesting. You get some reactions. I believe she knows exactly what they're asking her about. You do see her reach for her face, which is curious because, you know, what they're talking about is frazzle drip. And you see her reach for her face, you know, which is kind of an interesting reaction. But the first thing, you know, it's not her. The other thing that we need to be on guard with this is I think they're purposely bringing out certain terms. One of those terms being QAnon. Now, with that, you know, that was part of a conspiracy, supposedly, that they're claiming that, you know, there's people who follow Q. Those people were calling themselves Anons or QAnons. And there's been a push to try to make anything that those Anons are saying or highlighting, which particularly revolves around child movement and stuff. That's what they're trying to hush about. You know, the QAnon people or those they're labeling with that, you know, they're trying to discredit them. They're trying to not just discredit the people and make them look like, you know, they have forms of mental illness or they're not all together or they're liars. What is it they're really wanting to discredit? It's that child movement happens and how big that is. And so you'll see that term throughout. And in fact, that term has even gone into the courts where people have tried to discredit true witnesses and people explaining things under that term. In fact, you see that term, there's people who've labeled that term to Timothy Charles Homseth, to Neely Blanchard, as well as to others. You know, moms that were coming forward about their children being being moved and transported from one place to another. We know that CPS is doing that. We know the judicial system is working hand in hand with sheriffs, with lawyers, with the school systems, with CPS, with, you know, home health, even more. I think it's going to come out that a lot of our Homeland Security and other institutions, agencies, you know, we know in the past about the finders, you know, through the FBI. So, you know, what are they trying to cover up with that term? You know, many of us have seen the pictures that come out of that restaurant that she was talking about where the Pizzagate supposedly was taking place. Many have seen I forget his full name, but it's like Alfonso something, you know, the man who ran that. You know, there's just no way to explain it in other terms. We've seen the pictures. We know there's things that have happened. In fact, you know, we know people have viewed the Frazzle Drip tape. The majority of those people who were individuals trained to deal with, you know, grotesque, horrific criminal activity, the report is that they completely lost it. They lost it when they watched what she did to the child in that video. You know, and then they don't even bring out all the connections. You know, you get some shady stuff, right? As it goes on, you know, the claim is, you know, does she know Epstein? Oh, no, he's just a guy. He just ended up there. Think about this. This is a Secretary of State who's now serving as the First Lady. And you're just going to have somebody able to invite somebody to a dinner or a family thing. I mean, what's up with that? 17 times? You know, that's just going to happen. Then you get her, you know, you get her connections through that, you know, she claims, oh, it's just the historical interior design people, you know, who allowed him in. Really? The people setting up your dinner are inviting, you know, pedophiles, known pedophiles, because he was known in 2008. You don't think he had to do a security clearance to get in there? You know, it's all BS made up. You know, we know the historical connection that goes straight to the UN, right back to Rothschild, who's heading that up, working with Ted Turner and Dick Cheney and all these other congressmen, you know, in their circle groups, as well as former presidents, engaging in the evil that they're doing. That's the interconnections with all of that. You know, then the story gets even better, you know, because beyond that, oh, he just got his way in, you know, then she gets into, you know, oh, those things are just the conspiracies. Why does she use that term? You know, there's other terms that they like to drop too. One of those is fantastical. We've talked about how, you know, Michael Aquino used that, but they profit off of those terms. You know, there's a profit for them in the use of those terms. And, you know, with the legal things, you know, how many judges, how many lawyers, like when we look back, right? Who's really giving the schools, the sheriffs, the communities, the ability to traffic these children while not being held to account? It's your courts, your judges, your lawyers. And what was her past? A lawyer, right? Who is she protecting in that? That's her duty. That's her brotherhood vow, is to cover her brother's sin, right? Who are all the brother's sins she's covering? Well, you know, where'd the laptop come from? What's the connection there? Werner was a past boyfriend, husband, partner of Huma Abedin, right? The very person that she's engaging in that movie Frazzle Drip with in killing a child, you know, who's now married to Soros's son, who was a councilman, the phoenix of a council, right? Boy, the world is small. It just keeps turning around, and they just continue to cover, you know, the sins. And why does she not cover Bill's sins? Notice that? There's no covering. Oh, Bill can answer his own questions. Nowhere in the system would you get that, because, you know, they sit in the same circle group. In fact, they sat in my circle group. you know, they aren't going to be throwing each other out for lunch, especially at their level. You know, even if it was just for the sexual things, she'd be like, oh, you know, if she was thinking maybe Bill can handle it if he gets caught for the sexual things, right? Well, there's more they're protecting there, but this isn't the real Hillary. There's no way she would throw Bill out for lunch. You know, I mean, think about that. Did she throw him out for lunch when he had affairs with Monica Lewinsky? No. She stayed as the faithful wife to work the marital issues through, right? So why now would she throw him out to the sharks? It's not the real Hillary. You know, this woman is a faker, as is the Bill. I think the Bill is a big faker too. And I even heard that the lawyer representing him was somebody that was also with them on the flights with the Epstein stuff. So how can you have somebody I heard that even the lawyer was named in the documents. How can you have somebody who's named in the documents representing them, you know, lawfully and have a fair trial, which that gets into, you know, or a fair disposition, we'll call it. But this gets into further things. How can Congress, if they're just as guilty, the majority of them having Masonic connections, having ties to the Brotherhood or the sovereign military, I've brought out how our Congress and House of Representatives is stacked heavy with sovereign military. I have brought out my concern that if something happens to our president and vice, who's the next person to be in charge of our nation? It's going to be somebody who's in the sovereign military, the way things are stacked right now. And how can those who are part of the issue, you know, notice how they're not addressing any Brotherhood, any sovereign military things, any things through the schools, the courts, the local governments, our states. They're not addressing any of the trafficking issues in those areas with children. Why? Right? Why? Because their names they're all guilty. They all are participants, right? And they're being called out. And I think it's to see what they'll do. I think that's why DJT said, yes, release everything, release it all, right? Because he's watching them make stuff up. I think a lot of things are going through are fake, and now they're playing fake dispositions, making it look like they're doing their job, like they're researching. But what are they doing? They're priming things up, right? One of those things is the term QAnon. They're priming that term, you know, with the purpose and intent of bringing that out further. So yeah, it's going to get interesting, you know, lawfully, if they have a reason, if they have involvement in the same thing, they cannot be asking those questions. They, you know, how can they bring forward the truth if they, you know, if they're not in the truth? So we'll see where it goes. We'll see. Oh, you got to unmute your mic. Yeah.
Muted again. Firstly, thank you so much, Booker Giorgio. I think it is Booker Giorgio 9307. So much appreciate your super sticker. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I'm wondering though, we're seeing a lot of arrests being made across the world about this, you know, over the people being brought to task. How far do you think it will go? How far do you think it will go? Do you think people like Bill and Hillary will get arrested? Because we know damn well that they are guilty. Is it still the judicial system? Because we know that for the system to operate the way that it has been, it has to control and own the judicial system amongst others, right?
Yeah.
So does the judicial system continue to support these lies because there's evidence?
The judicial system is under Sharia law. Now think of this, where does it go next? Where do we see the movement of things? All of a sudden we see things happening in Iran. Khamenei, he was involved in a lot of stuff. And I've brought out his connection to the 1984 Star Wars Now weapons display by Ronald Reagan and other world leaders where they were buying, selling, and trading children. He was involved in that. The curious thing, he sat in circle groups too. Was he in circle groups with, these people, with Hillary, with Bill, with others? Was he in circle groups for end time things? He was. So the curious thing is, he was trained. Khamenei was part of the end time things. He was meant to bring in certain things, particularly with military wise. On the great day that they're going to gather into battle, he was meant to be there, bringing in his army to, basically snub their noses at God and try to usurp God's throne room. He was a firm person in that and, was going to bring his army. But now he's dead. So where does that leave us? Is it an accident? No. I think what we're seeing is the hand of God, that even though they've got all their plans, their agenda, what does the enemy do when everybody he spent all this time and money investing in isn't available to do the jobs he created them to do? It's not something that you can just train other people to immediately pick up and complete. There's things he can't do now. I'm sure he's going to fake it and try to make it as best he can. But the truth is that it's a sign from God that God is sovereign and that the enemy's plans are not going to succeed. And that's what we're seeing is these signs of God that show, the Lord is in control. So I think also that Khamenei is a direct sign to the Clintons of their impending doom. We think of all the terrible things that Khamenei did. We think of how he threatened our president, how he threatened we, the people, with destruction. What has he actually done to his own people? He's utterly destroyed Iran. The economy there, the women, the children. Think about his legacy of destruction of that people. And now, what can happen? The same as in Venezuela. Now the people have a chance at freedom. And you can't, there has to be a building up. There has to be a restoring of the wealth of the nations and building up of their inheritance. And that's what everybody deserves, to have an inheritance for their children and for the children of those nations. And I'm thankful because we don't think about that the extent of the child movement has hit every nation. How many children from America, were used and violated? How many children of Venezuela? How many children of Iran? Your Muslim Brotherhood, they keep the girls and the boys in those races because many of them are descendants of Ishmael lines as pure races. How many, were bought, sold, traded, and moved from one nation to another, exploited in some way? And then, that even gets into, as Nancy, who had come on in the past, had brought out the exploitation of women through the scientific, through the universities. So we see that. We see those countries, those nations, the trafficking at all levels. And then with that, how do you begin to restore those nations, to rebuild them up? to put proper people who will rule rightly and justly in place. So I think that there's a sign there that is, you know, that the Clintons will see, you know, these fakers. I think they'll be held to account for the crimes of the real ones. And, you know, the devastation of.
Do you think that
is far worse than Kamani's?
Do you think that they'll start blowing the whistle on each other?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we have a lag here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I think that they will not come out that they're fakers, because if that's found, I mean, think about the authority, think about, you know, the advantage they had, you know, taking advantage of those former positions in government and what they have done in that name with that advantage. I think they know that the people, you know, would not receive that, you know, I don't think they'll do it. I think pride, I think they will claim to be who they are no matter what the cost. I really do, but I could be wrong. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll be like, hey, I didn't sign up for this gig and I might as well get out now and hope I just get jail time. Yeah.
Well, I think what's great here is that it's coming out. And I think, you know, once the dominoes start falling, yes, this is still early days and everyone's uncertain. And, you know, I don't think Bull and Hill are going to be very happy to be going down and all their buddies are still sipping champagne and eating caviar on a deck somewhere. So I'm sure they'll probably start blowing the whistle and start mentioning a few names. As in these situations they usually do. You know, the Brotherhood secrets then, well, they're not that, you know, they're not that binding at that stage anymore. If it's your ass on the line and you can get immunity for something, you're going to blow that whistle because, hey, babe, you know, there's no honor among thieves, actually. You know, they'll be honorable for a space in time while it serves them, but at the end of the day, they're just a bunch of gangsters that don't know how to tell the truth.
Right.
Interesting. Wow.
I see something in the chat here, Colleen, or Captain, sorry, was it one of them? One of them said that they were talking about, you know, the real people who are supposedly gone, like John Brennan, Aquino, Hillary, supposedly all dead. Someone made the comment that I had Aquino exhumed. That's not true. I made the request. I requested that his body be exhumed so that we could know for sure and confirm that he was dead. But interestingly enough, these individuals are masters of faking people's deaths. Is it true? Even Carcock, you know, Carcock, Aquino, the real John O'Brien, the real Hillary, are they really dead or have they been camping out at places like Venezuela, Greenland, Iran? Was Kamani hiding them? You know, who knows? We'll find out, but it could get really good. I might be surprised.
Well, you never know. I tell you, we could. The only thing I know is that we should prepare ourselves for a few curveballs, because nothing is ever the way we think it's going to be.
They raise themselves from the dead, right? Might be surprised.
Right.
I might, you know, see them in the news 5 years down the lane, but it's really, you know, not them is what they'll claim.
Exactly. Wild. Wow. Thank you, Jess. Very much. Oh, Ellen, thank you so very much. Appreciate your super sticker. Yay, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Wow, Jess. I think I wrote down what I wanted to. Yeah, I was talking more about the inversions, the president's wife. So for me, and not just America, everywhere, right, in the world. But it just seems like this whole satanic religion has been coming in for the longest time, because we can see how long they've been doing that, conning the public. And then you have the Victoria secret models walking up and down in their lingerie without an iota of cellulite, and every girl is going, well, how does that girl not have cellulite, for example? I mean, cellulite is a very woman thing, but men don't have it. And we've been taught to believe cellulite is repulsive, it's disgusting, it's gross, and we've got to do everything in our power to get rid of. And I'm just talking one product, okay? Let's never mind the other 50,000 products available. Just one product, and how many of these products have been produced over the years. Let's just talk about the very popular one, cellulite treatment for women. How many billions? Because we have Victoria's Secret models who've been inverted, and as most men do not have cellulite. So every woman will now strive to look like that and go and buy every cellulite product on the market, so that she too can have firm thighs. It's wild to me. It's wild to me that this is what they. I mean.
Well, and Wilder,
I've never gone with that whole.
They'll throw all the blame on the men for these things. Notice how they're trying to, get Bill. All the focus is on Bill, Jeffrey, Prince Andrew, all the men. What is the truth is that the women are 10 times worse than the men. The women are just as involved, and we'll be surprised. We'll be surprised when we start hearing about the women and, just how much more nasty they are in these things than the men.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I mean, women when they are cruel, oh my. Oh my. Oh my. Wow. Mm-hmm. It's bad. I agree. It's bad. Anyway, Jessie, thank you. And thank you for sharing. And thank you, everybody, for joining us in the chat. Nice crowd we had in with us today. Welcome, everybody. And thank you. And now we're just about to say goodbye.
Did you want me to close off?
Jess. Yes, I was going to say, is there anything else you just want to maybe share with our viewers where they can catch you?
Yeah, you can find me on kingdomlivingwithjessie.com, and I do have many events coming up as well as coachings. You also can find my series Unveiling the System and things about the council, and the episode with Ted Turner and Dick Cheney on there, which explain a lot. So I encourage you guys to view those if you haven't yet, and keep your ears tuned to timothycharleshomeseth.com. You'll find a lot of stuff about my affidavits, my Congress petitions on there, and anything going forward, you'll find that on there as well. So let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. And as hard as it is to hear, we thank you that we can discuss these things, that we can put all the facts on the table, that we can wrestle through the things we don't understand. And we ask for wisdom, knowledge, and further understanding into these matters. We also ask for righteousness and justice. Lord, we ask that you would secure justice for our children, that you would secure the ability for them to report criminal activity, as well as the ability to get due process for that. And Lord, we know that there is so much corruption, but nothing is impossible for you. So we ask for your righteous ways to be instituted. We ask, Lord, for you to put things in a right order, and we ask that you will hold to account those who have been engaged in evil against the children and against the world. We ask for this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.